I fear this stuff has completely taken over my life. Hi, I'm Hannah. I am in my 20s, married, I'm a realtor, and I've recently gotten to my absolute favorite hobby of all time, and that is sourdough. It's so funny. So I just wanted to sit down. I want to tell you a little bit about my journey and answer some questions because I have been getting such a load of questions. So let's just dive into all things sourdough. And if you're like thinking, I don't like to bake, I would never like sourdough, well, just wait till you hear my story because it might change your mind a little. I think I always thought sourdough was kind of like homestead for moms, people that wanted to make everything from scratch. So I thought that would not interest me. I'm not a mom. I'm not into like the whole homesteading thing. Don't know a lot about it. So I really felt like it wasn't applicable to me. I wasn't like really into baking or anything. And actually I moved into a new house. We built a new construction home and we moved in end of October. And prior to that, the other house that we bought last year that we were living in, the kitchen it was just not functional enough to get into any extreme of baking or cooking or anything other than just your basic cooking, your breakfast, supper, whatever. But now I have an 8-foot island. I have a kitchen that I absolutely love. And I decided to get into like a little bit more cooking, bit more baking, just dipping my toes into everything. And it's funny because I had never made regular bread before in my life. And I just mean like your regular loaf of bread where you get the activated yeast and you make it in a couple hours. So one day I was like, I should just make some bread because I've never made it. And I don't know if it's gonna turn out, but I wanna give it a try. And it honestly, first shot, turned out amazing. My husband was like, this is the best bread I've ever had. It tasted like a soft pretzel. It was amazing. And I think that's what kind of like got me into the thinking of the sourdough. So I was in a lot of groups, like sourdough groups, because I guess a few years ago, like the idea popped in my mind and I would always see people like posting their starters and can't get this to work out. It's moldy. And I was like, a starter that you have to feed. Like I was so confused and I always just kind of put it off because I was like, I don't think that's for me. That looks very confusing. Until I don't even know like what the clicking point was. But I think one day I was like, I want to start a starter. So that was like a whole other thing. And that was so frustrating. It was definitely like the hardest part because a lot of people like their starters just will not get to the active point. They go moldy, they fail. I've had so many people reach out to me, Hannah, like my starter's not working. So that's where I decided to sell my dehydrated starter, but we'll get back into that later. So my starter at first, it was just not doing anything. I was so frustrated. I was like, I want to be able to bake with this. Like, I bought the stuff to make the sourdough and stuff, but my starter wasn't ready. I was so frustrated already. And then I was like, is my house not warm enough? Because it matters a lot about you, like your temperature, but my home usually is warmer than I'd even like because it's a new build. It's very well insulated. Till finally my starter thrived and I accidentally almost killed it, which is kind of a funny story, but I was so desperate to get my starter to grow and it was just not working. So I read that like you could put it in the oven with the light on to like create a bit of heat. But me being me goes to make like supper or something, turns on my oven with my starter inside that I was spending forever trying just to get to the active point. I Googled it. Everything online said your starter's ruined, trash it, start all over. And I was like, if this starter is ruined, if it's killed, even though it didn't even feel alive at that point, I was like, I'm never trying sourdough again. I'll give up. It's clearly not for me. So I was like, I touched the jar and I was like, no, like I literally burnt my hand trying to take off the lid. Like it was in a mason jar glass and it was scalding. But I put my finger inside to touch like the actual liquid of the starter and she was like, just warm. She was not hot because we know that hot kills yeast. And I was like, what the heck? And I was like, I'm going to try an experiment because what do I have to lose? I'm either throwing this out and giving up or trying this. So I took a new jar, mason jar, that was obviously not heated up, poured it in, got rid of, like washed out the hot one. After that, my starter has been thriving. I'm not saying to do that because I've heard that happen to so many people and it never worked out. I think I got lucky. Maybe I was meant to get in the sourdough world, but then I was like, okay, I can't give up now. Now I'm invested because the universe just granted me with this free sourdough pass. And honestly, I have been absolutely obsessed with sourdough ever since. I just recorded like another 7 minutes of great information and then the video disappeared. So anyways, trying to regroup where I was. So anyways, my sourdough had superpowers, and I started out with a little bit, and now I have 3 massive jars. It's just continued to grow and thrive. So I had so many people reaching out saying, I can't get my starter to work, nothing's working. So that is when I decided to take my starter and dehydrate it, and I'm now selling it on Etsy. I will link it below. So if you're wanting to get into sourdough, it really skips the guesswork. You just get it rehydrated, and within a few days you get to bake, and that's where the fun really starts. I also have a Facebook community, so I'll link that Facebook group below so that you can join that. You can get the starter and we can get going together. I plan to make a lot of videos focusing on, I have a couple like sourdough recipes, how to make a loaf in 8 hours, how to make a loaf in a day, which is great. And then I also have one that is how to make one in 2 days that's more geared towards anyone that's working 9 to 5, because you can start it in the night, work on it the next morning, and bake it that night. So I'll do that video as well, which is really great. Little tip is, if you want to get into like the sourdough world, but you don't want to invest in a Dutch oven yet, loaf pan, dollar store, $4. If you do want a Dutch oven, they're like 55, 60 bucks on Amazon, and they work fabulous. But back to my story, when I finally got my sourdough starter to work out, I made my first loaf. I researched a bunch, and I was like, oh, is this gonna turn out? And honestly, only my first loaf was a flop. It was a bit flat, and I'll insert a photo here. And ever since then, it has been, my loaves have been pretty great. I'll insert some photos. So it's honestly not as hard as people say. Getting the starter is the worst part, like if you made it from scratch, unless you get dehydrated, which is amazing. But yeah, after that, I got the hang of it, and it's been going great. And also, like, I can, if it will let me insert a video here, I will, but I have a video of my starter doubling in under an hour. She is crazy active. I named her Cecilia, and she's on fire, so you won't be disappointed. Honestly, sourdough has become so addicting. It is so fun. Anything from doing mini loaves to doing inclusions. I took little Lindor chocolates the other day. I put them in a mini loaf. It was the best thing ever. So let's talk about some commonly asked questions. What flour do I use? Bread flour. Any unbleached is fine. You can do all-purpose. I prefer bread flour. That's what I started with. That's what I'm just going to continue with. Get it at Costco if you're going to use a lot, because you go through so much of it. Everyone asks how much maintenance is in your starter. You could get it really active, put it in the fridge, feed it once a week. I have 3 massive jars on the counter that I feed every day. Only takes a few minutes. Another thing is, I have people asking, can you only make 1 loaf with this? How many loaves can you make with the starter? And do you use the whole pouch? You use the whole pouch. It is 10 grams, and you can make unlimited loaves. That is the great thing about it. If you want to make 1,000,000 loaves, you can. As long as you keep feeding it and you keep it alive, then you have an unlimited supply of bread. It's just your job to keep her alive. I'm so excited to share a lot more sourdough content, recipes, tutorials, tips, tricks, journey, all the things. So I really hope that you will subscribe and join along this journey. Also, check out the link below for my dehydrated starter on Etsy if you would like to get started, and join my Facebook group. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.